know, I got it. I got the concept. Yes, you're right. You can technically run 36 Centurions in a tournament legal list. As per the core rules, you are limited to only using 3 of the same datasheet in your army, and there are 2 different datasheets for Centurions, the Assault and the Devastator Centurions. You can have a maximum of 6 models in each unit, so some basic maths, that's 6 units of 6 models for 36 total Centurions.
The numbers don't lie!
It also fits into a 2,000 point list, costing just 1,890 points for all 36, so all you need now is to put any character in there to be the warlord, and that is a legal list. So surely, as the Centurion guy, I should be running 36 Centurions at all times, right? Right? No! There are 3 reasons why I do not run 36 Centurions. 1. I don't own 36 Centurions. Yet. I am actually quite close with the extras I've been accumulating from various places for various reasons, and 6 Assassinine Terminators I can proxy to bolster my Centurion forces. But even with all of those, I'm still not at 36. That does make it quite tricky to make a list that uses 36 Centurions, because as much as people are quite relaxed and accepting of proxies, kit bashes, and not being WYSIWYG, they usually don't like playing against a list where half of the models are invisible. Insert purple orc joke here. B, I do make a big song and dance about my list being the 18 Centurion list, but it's an 18 Centurion Screaming Ravens list. My homebrew successor chapter utilizes other units to create the overwhelming cacophony that drowns out the noise of the Centurions stomping up behind you to press the barrel of a las cannon into your skull. They aren't just the all Centurions army. It just so happens that it's half the army and Centurions are really cool. And third, when I go to tournaments, I actually want the game to be, you know, playable. 18 Centurions is an irresponsible number of Centurions to begin with, but it's not so unreasonable that it makes the game basically impossible to play. It actually is legitimately a viable number if you build around it and have access to tricks to mitigate the weaknesses. Whenever you're looking at maximizing a certain unit in a list, there tends to be a point in which you cross the viability line and the army falls apart. And this goes for whatever kind of 40k you're playing, whether that's competitive, narrative, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 points, any kind of game type. As you add more and more of the same unit, there's a threshold where adding more of that unit doesn't add any value to the army. In fact, it just makes everything worse, with each subsequent unit only further decreasing the viability of the army. At that point, the only way it becomes good again is to go all in, where having the absolute maximum of that unit makes it a fun list again because of the absurdity of it. For Centurions, having 9 is a popular amount in a lot of lists at the moment due to the absolute insanity of the Shadowvanguard Talon detachment, but that's boring. Since starting this competitive journey, I've tried 12 Centurions, which does actually work, and have been using 18 for a long time, slowly refining my list and playstyle to make it not just viable, but I sincerely believe genuinely competitive. However, adding more Centurions at this point would require removing units from a list that are the reason I'm actually finding success. 21 Centurions would just make everything worse, as I'd have to remove 150 points worth of extremely useful models to replace them with models that are not that good. Therefore, essentially, any amount of Centurions between 21 and 33 would not only be straight up bad, it wouldn't even be that funny. Oh, I have 30 Centurions. It plays like shit, can't win a game, and I haven't even got the common decency to at least make a spectacle of the whole thing. This works for other units. For example, Rogal Dawns. 1 to 2 Rogal Dawns? Boring. Meta. Probably being played by someone who wants to run a competitive list and actually try and win. Ugh. 3 Rogal Dawns. Excessive, but usable. And could be built around. 4 to 5 Rogal Dawns? Neither viable nor interesting. Too many to be built around to be usable, but also not so many that it could be entertaining. Therefore, your options are either 3 Rogal Dawns or 6. Large centerpiece models follow a similar pattern. 1 Storm Surge? Cool and usable. 2 Storm Surges? Excessive and unwieldy. 3 Storm Surges? Spectacular and best. Also see Baneblades, Wraith Knights, Monoliths, Khorne Lord of Skulls. That last one actually being something that someone ran at the London GT. God damn you, legend. What I'm trying to say is that there is always a point where you have to make a decision. Are you going to stop when you find a good balance point and take the path of the intellectual, where you journey to learn, improve, and refine your chosen army in the crucible of battle, playing the game to its fullest to get every last drop of potential out of your favorite unit? Or are you going to rip your shirt off, flex your bulging muscles, scream at the top of your lungs, and hurl a Mankey Super O stuck to the brim with nothing but killer cans at your opponent? All that being said, whether it's 120 grots or every flavor of Baneblade, Mankey Super O for table.stronghold.com will keep your mini safe, secure, and easier to transport than ever before. Alongside the excellent terrain sets, the Mankey Super O uses the strongest MDF to ensure that your models remain undamaged when yeeted at your opponent's head, with the adjustable trays and the power of magnets, ensuring that at the bare minimum, your opponent will be knocked out cold with at least 1 broken bone and wake up with a concussion. Right now, you can get 25% off with code PAUL25, and there there is free shipping to the USA, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and most of the EU. So you'd better go to ted.stronghold.com right now or click the link down below to get the best model carrying solution / projectile weapon hybrid in the world. And thank you again, Ted.stronghold, for sponsoring. Marcus Yobo should only use store and transport minis. Models about itself and Ted.stronghold do not condone using Marcus Yobo or any acts of violence. This is obviously a joke, and neither Ted.stronghold or about itself alive for any damaged models or person. All that being said, did you really think playing 36 Centurions hasn't crossed my mind? What makes you think that I don't want to do it? Of course I want to do it. What I don't want to do is just waltz into a tournament with 36 of the finest chunkers just to get steamrolled over and over and over again. There is a possibility that Centurions will no longer be playable when 11th edition comes out, which could be as soon as next year. If Centurions are doomed to enter the Legends Vaults, I'd regret not taking the opportunity to full send it at an event with nothing but my favorite unit in the entire game. So this isn't just something I want to do. This is something I am going to do. I'm calling my shot right now. I will bring 36 Centurions to a 40k tournament, and I can't think of a more fitting place to do it than where it all started. South Coast Super Major 2026. I will finally fulfill my destiny and ascend from Centurion Guy to Centurion God. Assuming it's actually still possible, because there are at least 2 balanced data slates before then, and people have finally realized that Devastator's Centurions are completely fucking bonkers, so they may well be nerfed, making the already tight list even worse to the point where it simply isn't a legal army anymore and not even possible to achieve. But I think as long as you can still fit a character in there after filling the list with more Centurions than the Roman Empire, it should be fine. Viable? Almost certainly not. Fun? Potentially. Cool as hell? Absolutely. Now that I've made that decision and declared it on the internet, it's time to figure out the theoretical best way to make it actually work. We're going to go through all the potential options to see what the best way to play this would be, but before then, let me know in the comments your thoughts on what you do and any ridiculous spam lists you either have or want to try, and whilst you're down there, like and subscribe so I can at least get the dopamine from watching a number go up to offset the inevitable torturous experience I'm going to have trying to play 40k with every model moving an earth-shattering 4 inches. Remember, YouTubers base their entire value as a person on that subscriber number, so please, for the love of God, give my being purpose before I spiral even further into madness. As of the release of this video, 36 Centurions comes out to a total of 1,890 points. Weapons-wise, I think it's fine to play it fairly simple. All of the Devastator Centurions will have las cannons and missiles. Honestly, I don't see the point in the grav cannons. They are half the range of a las cannon, only AP 1, and being anti-vehicle 2+ isn't really that special when the las cannons can easily get to 2+ with both at the moment. And even if they are wounding on 3s, they have full wound rerolls. And anti-vehicle 2+ doesn't work on monsters, so half the armies in the game won't be affected. Heavy bolters? Please, the missiles cover that, and they have the blast keyword on top. The assault Centurions are a little different, however, as both the flamers and melters are useful for different things. Flamers are excellent short-range Overwatch threats for infantry, and melters help double down on their big game hunting prowess in their melee. Depending on your choice of detachment or your game plan, you may want to have a different mix, but for me, I think the best way to do this would be having 2 lots with the flamers and 1 lot with melters. Melters are good damage, but they don't do anything that the las cannons can't do. It does have its use cases, like extremely high armor targets and being able to get a minimum of 3 damage per successful wound through if you're close enough. But I don't think you need 2 lots of these compared to the flamers. But I am open to be convinced otherwise here. The bolters on all the assault Centurions is a ton of shots for weight of fire, and I think having flamers on top of that means you can really pump up the number of shots into something like Catans. With Oath of Moment and potentially some of the detachment choices, you can actually bump the strength even higher or get +1 to wound, which can really help that weight of fire punch through even high armor targets. For each of these assault Centurion units, having the sergeant with the grenade launcher makes a lot of sense, so there is potential access to the grenades stratagem, as this will basically be your only access to mortal wounds. The only thing that's missing profile-wise is infantry killing melee. Both versions have a low number of attacks. The Devastators aren't terrible in melee, but that 4+ weapon skill is a bit of a problem. Whilst the assault Centurions will absolutely rip through monsters, vehicles, and fortifications if they were ever used, they are still only 3 attacks each, so a big squad of infantry won't fall over that easily. In order to make sure this list is actually legal, you're going to need a warlord. There are 2 ways of doing this, either 1 character with an enhancement, or 2 cheaper characters that give you a bit more width. With only 110 points to spend, you're not exactly going to get much value out of them. Now, I've been going back and forth about this, because I kind of want to keep the spirit of this challenge? Sure, let's call it a challenge. That at least makes this whole debacle feel like an intellectual exercise rather than mental breakdown. To keep the spirit of this challenge, I don't know if I should be allowed to use any epic heroes. There are a few epic heroes that could be extremely useful. Aethan Shan and Karnok Var being 2 examples. What are they, darkened from League of Legends? Also, planning to have access to them when there are 2 data slates to get through is probably foolish anyway. I mean, I guess planning this entire thing before knowing it will actually be doable is foolish, but Look, what I'm saying is something like Karnak Var, right, is 100 points. If the total cost of my Centurions goes up by even just more than 10 points, I can't use him anymore, despite the fact he would be very, very good. But yeah, I'm going back and forth on this one. Let me know in the comments what you think. But how are we going to play it? What detachment is best for 36 Centurions? Let's consider what we're looking for here. What are we missing compared to a normal army list? The cool people out there are saying nothing, this list is perfect, but the intellectuals out there are probably saying scoring and movement. Baseline, we have no scouts, no infiltrates, no deep strike, no shooting or charging on advance or fallback, and 4 inches of movement across the entire goddamn army. That's going to make getting to and holding objectives suboptimal to be charitable, and absolutely fucking impossible to be slightly less charitable. Most opponents are going to be able to absolutely flood the board or cage me in immediately. Whilst my opponent is probably going to struggle to get through all that armor upon armor, and I can put out a lot of hurt, it isn't going to be useful when we haven't scored any points on either primary or secondary, and there aren't even any challenger cards to help me anymore. Anytime I need to do an action secondary, I'm losing a huge chunk of my damage potential. Unless I commit with the characters, each time I want to do an action, I'll be using a minimum of 300 points to do it. No cheap action monkeys here. Sure, they'll be able to withstand any damage and complete the action no problem, but they actually have to walk over there to do it. If I ever need to advance anywhere or fall back, I'm unable to do damage. So choosing a detachment that provides moving without penalties is non-negotiable. The detachment that leans into the strengths of Centurions, damage and resilience, won't do us any favors compared to a detachment that mitigates the core weaknesses. You might be saying to yourself, Paul, you absolute melt. This is a solved problem. You already play Shadowvanguard Talon. Just play that. First of all, I can't hear you in your house. You're going to have to speak up. Secondly, that is true. Shadowvanguard Talon, and by extension Vanguard Spearhead, are both decent options to pick here. And it is the fluffiest for the Screaming Raven's lore, which is why I've been using Shadowvanguard Speartalon for over a year now. But there are some problems. Aethan Shan would make Shadowvanguard Talon a contender just for the command point savings. But even with that, the big issue is that Shadowvanguard Talon can only get Centurions around the outside of the board, allowing Centurions to move into better places to get their firepower off, protect them from being tied up in melee with fallback shoot and charge. The other big stratagem, Stunning Fusillade, is great at powering up the Devastator Centurions, but I don't need to power up a squad of 6 Devastator Centurions when I have 3 lots of them. Reactive moves are nice, but that's again not exactly helping me hold objectives. That'll just end up making me retreat further into my own deployment zone. And as reactive moves are a normal move of up to d6 inches, I can only go as much as 4. That being said, however, the detachment rule is incredible. It makes Devastator Centurions even tankier against the big guns that will be trying to blow them apart from across the battlefield. The problem is that against melee armies, you basically don't have a detachment rule. A melee army is already a big problem for me with just 18 Centurions. I can't lose out on one of the few ways of getting extra buffs into the list. I need a detachment rule that is always going to help me in all situations. Enhancement-wise, Shadowmark has some decent options. Getting a Vect Aura can be extremely powerful, and making a character lone up could pair well with something, but the others require leading a unit. Shadowmark Talon works because it helps the Centurions so much while also giving the rest of the army lots of good tricks, such as turn 1 rapid ingress, trike lone up Vanguard veterans, infiltrating Blade Guard, etc, etc. You take out that second half of the equation, it doesn't quite hold up as much as you'd think. You can still do the Centurion shenanigans, but that would be all you can do. If I were to tier list it, and I will because a tier list makes a video instantly better and more watchable, I'd say Shadowmark Talon is a B tier choice and Vanguard Spearhead is a C tier choice. They're not bad and you can plan around them, but it doesn't give enough of what we need. You could find some play with a Deadly Prize in Vanguard Spearhead because that does give you sticky objectives, but it's just not as useful as fallback shoot and charge, so it has to be a lower tier because it is worse, but not so much that you wouldn't ever think about picking Vanguard Spearhead. Now we need to go through the rest of the Space Marine detachment options. We've done Vanguard Spearhead and Shadowmark Talon, so there's only another 29? Jesus Christ. Now, to be fair, we can get rid of a lot of them, so let's quickfire some of the shit ones. Anvil Siege Force, remaining stationary, is the opposite of what we need. Iron Storm Spearhead. Okay, detachment rule, but half the strats are for vehicles, and the other half are just damage buffs. First Company Task Force, it's First Company Task Force, and there's no cure. Librarius Conclave, if I wanted to make a powerful solo space wizard, I'd play D&D. Emperor's Shield, it's First Company Task Force, but yellow. Hammer of Averni. GW, stop trying to make First Company Task Force happen. It's not going to happen. Every single Black Templar detachment. Losing Oath isn't worth it for any of these, and they're too specialized. The Lost Brethren, Angelic Host, and Angelic Inheritors. Death Company, Jetpacks, and Characters. Can't do it. Inner Circle Task Force. Deathwing only, and I have nightmares about WoW when I hear the name Deathwing. Lions Blade Task Force. It's Deathwing and Ravencard specific. Black Spear Task Force. Deathwatch, Lamau. Every single Space Wolf attachment. They aren't exactly very good anyway, even if you're playing the Space Wolf units. Those are all, respectfully, complete garbage, and so bad that I won't even give them the satisfaction of being placed onto the tier list. Also, I can't be asked to try and fit them all into a single tier, and it will just make the whole tier list look horribly squished. So now we can go through the remaining 9 options, which realistically is kind of 7 options, because the legally distinct Salamander and White Scarred themed ones are so similar that, like with Shadowvanguard and Vanguard Spearhead, we can't assess them together. But we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because before all that, we have Gladius Task Force. Because when in doubt, Gladius Task Force. I've not used a Gladius Task Force, but I know that it is basically the default because it's so flexible. The detachment rule essentially gives us everything that we could ever want, but only for 1 turn per battle. But that does allow you to get an army-wide push with advance and shoot into advance and charge, or if you get alpha struck, you can make an army-wide fallback and eviscerate everything. For 1 command point, you can make 1 unit do any of those 2 things, and there's a lot of potential with this one. It has some damage buffing ones and a reactive move, but something to consider here is that command points will be very limited, as there's no way to get cheaper strats or regain points outside of discarding secondaries. So the less we can rely on them, the better. So having 1 really good one that you can use repeatedly is probably going to be better than several for different situations. That said, Honor the Chapter and Onslaught of Fire are great options if you need to punch up or get through heavy armor without relying on Oath of Moment. And a 2 CP Fight on Death is really strong, but maybe just too expensive. And I think trying to hold on to CP just in case you want to fight on death is going to severely limit your options through adaptive strategy. No uppy downy is a bit of a shame, but otherwise this is a very solid detachment, definitely one of the better ones. I'm a little hesitant to put it into S tier, but it's definitely high A tier and could be moved up depending on the other choices. Through the Fire and the Flames, we have the Firestorm Assault and the Forge Father's Seekers. The detachment rule gives all ranged weapons assault and +1 strength within 12 inches. This is diabolical. Basically, constant advance and shoot, which helps the Devastated Centurions, but it also allows the Assault Centurions to get up to strength 5 Bolters of Flamers and strength 10 Melters. Stratagem-wise, Crucible of Battle is a nice way to get more wounds through without Oath of Moment if you're in close, and Immolation Protocols gives insane value to your Flamers because of Twin Linked, allowing you to fish for 6s. Both versions also have Burning Vengeance, which is unusable. And quick side note, why did these 2 share the names for all the enhancements and stratagems when Shadowvanguard Talon changed everything? Weird. But speaking of differences, Firestorm Assault has Rapid Embarkation and Onslaught of Fire, which are both irrelevant because I don't have any transports. Forge Father's Seekers, on the other hand, has Wrathful Inferno and Blazing Earth. Wrathful Inferno gives you fallback and shoot, and Blazing Earth allows you to set fire to the floor around an enemy unit to give them -2 to charge. Both of these are fucking amazing. Again, the command points are going to be a problem, so can't be doing all of the tricks, but as you don't have to spend resource to be able to advance and still use the full firepower, these are really good options to support that. I'd say that Forge Fathers is S tier, definitely. And Firestorm Assault is D tier. It doesn't go with the completely useless attachments because it is actually usable. If you're using 36 Centurions and are thinking about picking Firestorm Assault, there is literally no reason to not choose Forge Father's Seekers instead, unless you were just trying to play on hard mode. And 36 Centurions already is playing on hard mode, so what the hell is wrong with you? Moving on to the Stormlance and Spearpoint Task Forces. Army-wide advance or fallback and charge is pretty good. Much better on the Assault Centurions, of course, but not a bad buff. We can ignore a decent chunk of the stratagems because they are limited to flying vehicles and mounted units only. Also, the names of the strats have changed again, even though they're the same. I don't get it. All I ask for is a bit of consistency, Games Workshop, please. Unfortunately, one of the strats we have to ignore is Withdraw and Regroup, which gives uppy downy, but only to flying vehicles and mounted, which unfortunately Centurions are not, no matter how hard I believe. Both have a reactor move, but the updated Spearpoint one comes with Lance or Lethals in melee, and just straight up advance or fall back and shoot. So even on turns where you're advancing to try to get the Assault Centurions into melee, you can have one of them or one of your Devastated Centurions still getting their shooting off. Compare that to Stormlance, which allows you to give a unit Assault, which is a worse way of getting advanced shoot, or a strat which is just straight up locked to the mounted keyword. This again is a case of why would you use it compared to the New Hotness. Old and Busted goes into D tier, and New Hotness goes into A tier. It's pretty decent, but I don't think it's as powerful as the other 2. Maybe it's on par with Gladius, but it's definitely decent. Now we're entering the world of divergent chapters, which means Oath of Moment is not as good, which we need to keep in mind when discussing its strength. Liberator Assault Group from the Blood Angels. It's mediocre, honestly. I'm still going through it because it's not completely useless, because it does give you access to either fallback shoot and or charge, or advanced shoot and or charge, which is, strictly speaking, useful. +1 attack and +2 strength on the charge is also very good, pushing the Assault Centurion Siege Drills to 4 attacks each at strength 12, or the Dev Sense to strength 7, which isn't amazing, but better than a kick in the nuts. You may have noticed there's a lot of and/ors here, which comes from the Red Thirst mechanic, which allows you to battle rock yourself for extra benefits, basically being able to do both of the things rather than one or the other. If you you're going to go for the more melee-oriented version of 36 Centurions, I would rather just take Spear Point. But there is something to be said for that extra strength combined with Lance to really take down big targets. I'd put this one into C tier. Against certain armies, it's going to be incredible, but it's just not very good against the majority of lists. Going from Blood to Dark now, the other Angels have 3 detachments that are potentially viable for Centurion spam, which surprised me actually. Unforgiven Task Force gives your army a way of still trying to hold objectives even through battle shock, which is not bad, but not the most useful either. It's potentially game-changing, but most of the time it isn't. Being able to add extra OC, though, is nice. With Centurions being OC2 already, you can get up to OC3, which could actually buff things up quite nicely. It helps with the objective game for sure, but not much else. The real power is in these stratagems. Lethal hits on potentially 5+ crits is incredible, frankly. Fallback, shoot, and charge is always good to have. Weapons gaining assault heavy and ignores cover makes me feel things. Shoot on death makes me feel things in all the right places. And 2 CP to get -1 to wound doesn't really make me feel anything at all, apart from a slight twinge of disappointment. A solid B tier. Decent strats with a less useful detachment rule to go with it. Wrath of the Rock is a decent choice with a very nice detachment rule. Whilst being tankier isn't the most necessary of things, being able to really stick around at the table can do wonders, even if you move slow, especially if the enemy is more shooting focused. Having the weapons that will be able to do damage to Centurions be less good is good. I haven't spoken about enhancements really, because most of them are either going to be useless because you need to lead a unit, or it just makes a single character slightly better. So having an option here to get an aura is notable. And you want a character sticking around to be able to use Inescapable Justice, which is expensive but allows you to get another Oath of Moment target, albeit this is the worst oath. There's an advanced shoot and charge strat, +2 strength to ranged weapons, which can be very nasty, and Leonine Aggression, which is basically heroic intervention, except it can be used at the end of the phase rather than immediately, which is decent. A nice choice, probably B tier. It's kind of cool. And finally, Company of Hunters, which is a weird one, but it is somewhat viable. Army-wide advance or fallback and shoot is incredible. And that's it. That's all you get. Every enhancement and non-armor contempt strat is Raven Wing locked. So you get 0 options outside of just having a good detachment rule. No additional tricks allowed. You might think that this makes it a bad choice. And it does. But also there is something to be said about simplicity. With how restricted you are on command points, maybe just relying on the core ones is a better strategy instead of having access to many different tools that you might not be able to fully utilize. The other reason I like this detachment is the audacity of it. Can you imagine rocking up to a tournament, not just with 36 Centurions, but 36 Centurions in a detachment that is designed not just for mounted units, but specifically Raven Wing mounted units? I think you'd actually do quite a lot with the psychological warfare of playing the Raven Wing detachment with the slowest motherfuckers in the codex. Imagine your opponent looking at this list and just trying to work out what it means. Why have you done this? Is there something they've missed? Is there something that makes this amazing? That would just do so much damage. They just have an aneurysm trying to work it out. It's still not good, but it would definitely get people talking. They wouldn't be saying anything nice, but they would at least remember you. Despite all that, I'm still hesitant to say I'd definitely play Forge Fathers, even though I'd consider it S tier. There's only so much you can determine based purely on theory crafting, and you have to actually test these things out. Maybe having assault weapons isn't as useful as it seems if I can't make any charges. Maybe not having enough command points makes me susceptible to being caught out on multiple fronts, and if I lack access to the tools I need to make plays, potentially just having the ability to always be able to advance or fall back and shoot does make Company of Hunters the best. Assuming that Centurions aren't nerfed into the ground, I have 6 months to prepare for this, so I guess I'd better get building and painting some Centurions. Or I could do what I did for the last South Coast Super Major and do it all a week before. That'd be stupid if I did that, because I don't think that's even possible to build and paint 18 Centurions in a week. So hopefully I've learned my lesson and don't leave everything to the last minute. But I'm sure I'll be fine. I couldn't possibly be that irresponsible. I'm fucked, aren't I? Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good YouTube stuff. If you want to support me further, you can buy my merch or become a member or patron like all of these lovely people whose names are scrolling past. I'm going to go now and spend the next 6 months regretting my life choices as I build up my one-shot meme army that will inevitably go into legends because GW doesn't want me to have nice things. Goodbye.